Hey everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be talking about how this singular book right here got me into Harvard College. Now, you might be wondering, how does a single piece of text get you into university? There's many factors, whether it's the SAT, GPA, interviews, extracurriculars, essays. There's so much that goes into a college application. So how exactly does one book get me into Harvard? Now, I wouldn't say this is an overstatement because it was integral in actually multiple of these categories. It was integral in my essays, integral in my interview, and integral in what Harvard rates as the personality factor. And also, I think it helped Harvard realize that there was a good fit between my academic experience and my academic wants and my academic interests, and also what Harvard has to offer in their liberal arts education. Now, how does this all tie together? Well, okay, here's the most underrated admissions hack in a sense, and it's giving a very personal reason on why you want to go to their college and why it's the perfect fit and why you need to go to that college. Now, of course, you're not applying to just one university, so you don't have to be stating in your essay, this is the only college I want to apply to, the only college I want to go to, unless you're, applying early decision. And the way that I conveyed my genuine interest for Harvard was citing one of their professors' books, which is this book. Now, it's a lot more specific than that. So Benjamin Friedman wrote The Moral Consequences of Economic Growth around 20 years ago, right? A few years before the 2008 crash. And he mentioned that the entire book's thesis is essentially that as economies develop, as economies become more developed and have sustained growth, not just a couple years of boom and bust, but they have sustained growth over decades, societies tend to be more tolerant, more democratic, and less authoritarian. So societies just get better. So it's a very simple correlation. And eventually he states that it's a causation, which he shows through many case studies, whether it's the US or UK. He basically states that, as economy grows, people just become nicer. It's a very pro-capitalist argument in a sense. But besides what the book is actually saying, I found it really interesting as it was a great intersection between statistics, history, and economics. And this is something that I'm interested in. And I displayed this interest by writing it in the Harvard essays. So I'm gonna bring out my application right now, and it says, okay, yes, the prompt that I responded to was prompt number 4 out of the 5 Harvard supplementals, which says, how do you hope to use your Harvard education in the future? Okay, so let's just pause there for the story. I know I've been talking about how this singular book got me into Harvard. I'm talking about how this was an integral piece of my application, but I just want to pause in the middle of the video here just to tell you a little bit of how exactly I wrote this in my essay and give you some practical advice. So we'll go into the story, the rest of the story in a bit, but okay, let me take out my laptop and show you how exactly this book was integrated into my essay. So prompt 4 reads, how do you hope to use your Harvard education in the future? Now, obviously I mentioned that, I wrote about my writing experience as a cashier, and I wrote about how this book, it was like a great fit for me, but it was sort of vague, and I talked about Pioneer, but let me explain in this section of the video how exactly I wrote it in my essay. So, now, in California, in Los Angeles specifically, where I'm from, there was speculation that there was a storm coming and there was going to be heavy rains and potential floodings, and this was labeled as Hurricane Hillary. Now, for me, it's like, in Los Angeles, if there's even 15 minutes of rain, everyone goes out saying, wow, this is such a big news. So Hurricane Hillary was highly anticipated. And one day, as I was working an 8-hour shift on I think it was on a Sunday afternoon, it was 4 or 5 p.m., suddenly, rain started pouring. There's pouring rain, and everyone is freaking out. There's probably dozens and even maybe 100 people that flood into the Rite Aid that I was working at. And at that moment, we decided to put all the umbrellas and we decided to put all of the equipment sort of more in the back so that we could have people or the foot traffic spread out throughout the store. And it was a very simple visualization of supply and demand, but that's how I was able to articulate how working as a cashier, moving that equipment, I was able to see the flow of people coming in be distributed, and people were eventually probably buying more of the non-essentials, whether it's they came in to buy umbrellas, but they might, stop by to get just a can of soda or some other equipment that wasn't really necessary. So I just found that, Rite Aid found a way to profit off a speculation just by moving something to the back of the store. And it allowed more people to come in, benefiting everyone, so that everyone was just clogged in the front of the store. So I thought it was very interesting. And that was the first paragraph of my what are you going to do with the Harvard education? It might seem like I'm not even answering the question, but essentially I'm laying down the grounds for I'm interested in economics. And then later on, I say the first sentence of my second paragraph is Benjamin M. Friedman, the former director of economics at Harvard, explained how situations like this occur all the time on a larger scale in his book, The Moral Consequences of Economic Growth, which is here. So I directly referenced this book in the second half of my essay, talking about how Friedman explains there's a lot of speculation. He goes through many examples of how speculation occurs. And then later he analyzes whether it's positive or negative for the economy, and then, correlates it to his thesis about how it's, creating more tolerant or non-tolerant societies. So that's besides the point. But I just wanted to emphasize that what I was reading in this book and what I was experiencing as a cashier at Rite Aid was essentially the same thing. One was abstract and one was practical. So since the rest of this video is pretty abstract and I'm just talking about, oh my goodness, like this book got me into Harvard, I just wanted to give this segment to lay down this context and to explain that when you're writing a good why us essay for a university, I would just suggest being able to blend some sort of actual lived experience and then some sort of more academic, intellectual, or abstract concept that you're pursuing or have pursued, and then tie it together. Now, what does that look like? For me, it was a lived experience of working at Rite Aid, and also the concept and abstract experience of reading this book wrote by Professor Friedman, and then connecting it to how it fits with my Harvard, or the want for a Harvard education, and I sort of combined it. Now, what can it look like in a different situation? So, let's say that you were working, I'm gonna use Los Angeles again. Let's say you're working at a store in Westwood, and you're currently, all the time you're working in high school, let's say junior in high school, working at this coffee shop, you're looking at the UCLA campus. You could make another combination of, like, let's say, the UCS it's not necessarily like a specific why UCLA, it's just why UCs in general, or like you can integrate that. But I guess just for example's sake, we'll say that UCLA specifically asks like why UCLA. You can have the practical lived experience of like, yes, I was working at a coffee shop, always looking at the UCLA campus and admiring like, oh, I really want to do this and that. And then you can have the more theoretical or abstract concept part where you're like, okay, I really like UCLA for this and this reason. And if you combine that, I think there's a stronger, more coherent story. So this segment of the video is just to say that, or just to explain like what was exactly written in my essay to answer the prompt, how do you hope to use your Harvard education in the future, and lay down some context. And later on, I wrote about how I want to pursue similar economic research or work in business or nonprofits or other like larger organizations in order to apply the economics that I learned. So that's stuff that I wrote in the last few sentences, but it was all set up by the experience of reading this book and also the experience of working at Rite Aid. So let's go back to the story part. If the story ended here, I would say, yeah, that's great. I was able to exemplify why Harvard's a great fit, why I specifically needed to go to that school, and how I've already demonstrated interest reading some books about economics that was written by Harvard professors. But what's interesting is the story actually continues into my freshman year of college. So I remember I had an extra slot. I needed to fill an elective, and there's something called first year seminars where you have a 12-person discussion class. And I decided, okay, I want to fill something out. And I was scrolling through the titles of the discussion seminars, and they were pass or fail, very low stakes, but just to learn. And I saw one that talked about how the class will explore the history of economic development. It will explore AI and robots in our current age, how we are entering a new age of automation with the intersection of machine learning and artificial intelligence. I was like, wow, this is such an interesting class, very futuristic and very relevant in a sense, especially now as artificial intelligence is integrated into every industry and every part of life in a sense. So I was like, okay, I want to try this out. And interestingly, the professor that was teaching it was Benjamin Friedman. And now, he's been a professor at Harvard for several decades and is semi-retired in the sense of he's not the head of economics anymore, but just teaching this discussion seminar. So I remember I enrolled in the class and had to petition, why do you want to be in this class? So I even wrote about in the Why Harvard essay that I really liked your book and I want to be in your class. And eventually I was able to get into the class. There was amazing discussions. I had dinner with the professor. He even signed my book, so let me try to find the page that he signed it. He signed it with like some thoughts on, like we had a lot of discussions on what we thought AI would look like. And I thought it was fascinating for someone to be in the forefront of artificial intelligence, or someone to be talking about artificial intelligence that was in the forefront of economic discussion for the last 50 years. It just shows that he's been consistently writing out his own beliefs, and I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, that's pretty much my story on how exactly this singular book what impacted my Harvard application. Now, I talked about this in every interview. I talked about this in my essay of why Harvard, which I thought was crucial, demonstrated why I really wanted to go to the university. And even I think it helped in my extracurricular page where I talked about the fit for Harvard, and eventually like Harvard scores you based on many categories, one being just like fit or personality. And I think I scored high on that specific department with large thanks to how I tied this book's connection to my own experiences. So that's essentially how this singular piece of text, this one book, got me into Harvard.